if anyone here ever gets the chance to go floating in a canoe, don't do it. Go in a raft instead. It's far more fun. I was going on a float trip. I went on a float trip with my girlfriend and 2 other couples. One was a married couple, one wasn't. Our plan was we were going to leave on Monday, float all day Tuesday, and then come back on Wednesday. Monday morning rolls around. We're supposed to meet at 10:30. The first couple shows up in my house that's not married. And we start packing. And then the married couple shows up at 11 o'clock. And I noticed something a little different about them. I'm trying to think, what are they holding in their hand? What are they drinking? It's 11 a.m. and they're drinking beer already. But it is for a float trip, and technically, once they arrived, the float trip started. They finished their beers, we finished packing. We get everything loaded into my girlfriend's truck. We start our 3-hour drive to Salem, Missouri. I don't like long drives. If it's over an hour, I want to know how much does a plane ticket cost. Eventually, we got to Salem, Missouri, and on this float trip, we weren't going to camp. We were going to actually stay in a cabin. We find the place we're going to check in. It's like a little convenience store, what used to be a gas station. There's one pump in the front. You go in, and there's a lot of property. So there's a lot of back roads, dirt roads, side roads we're going to have to go through to get to our cabin. We asked the lady there, how do we get there? Now, you would think this is all they do. This is their business. They rent these cabins for people to go on float trips. Yet, there was no map, no easy set of written instructions she could give us. The directions she gave us entailed an elbow curve, which, this is my elbow here. This would be a U-turn. Now this is my elbow. This is straight. So I don't know what an elbow curve is. And then, after we pass the elbow curve, amongst many trees, we look for a big pine tree with a little sign and go left. Believe it or not, with those directions, we actually got lost. We had to go to another convenience store to get directions to get to our cabin. And they made it much easier. They said, go down a certain road, find the street, go right, and go down this dirt road, and you'll be there. Our cabin was very secluded. It was almost a mile down a dirt road. When I saw it, it was a nice scenery. There's nothing else around. It looks like one of those nice cabins you see in the movies where everyone gets murdered. But that happens in the nighttime. And we were there in the daytime, so we're fine. Now, I love exploring new houses, cabins, whatever it may be. If it's something I haven't been in, I want to go explore it, see what's there. I go exploring through this cabin. I'm looking at the rooms and the closets. And on my room where I'm staying, from the outside, there's a set of doors that goes into the living room and a set of doors that goes into my room. So there's 2 front doors. I think, well, this is pretty interesting. I'm going to go into my room through the set of front doors. I open it up, and when I open up the screen door, I look up. In between the screen door and the door, I see a hornet's nest the size of my fist, and it's covered with hornets. And all of a sudden, I can tell they're working, and they stopped, and they all just stared at me. I didn't quite know what to do. I had the door, and I was freaking out, but I was like, don't do anything quick. They're going to swarm you and sting you. This will not be a fun float trip. So I go to close the door slowly. And at that point, they didn't like that. So they started to pluck off that nest, and they started coming at me. Well, I saw this. I turned, I ran, and I was doing the limbo in all directions, flailing my arms, while screaming like a girl. I was a little embarrassed. My friends made fun of me for it. After that incident, I stayed away from that door. I used the door in the back. We went to bed that night. We got up the next morning. It was time for our float trip. We were going floating. I've been floating before, but this was my first time in a canoe. We take the truck to the site where we're going to pick our canoe out. Everyone unloads, and we're looking around trying to find the one we want. And I stick my foot in the water to feel it, and the water was cold. It was freezing cold water, and it's summertime. Which I later found out that when you go floating, if it's a spring-fed river, that means that where spring-fed, it just means cold. That's what it means. Cold river. We picked the canoe out that we want. My girlfriend, she's an expert canoer. She's canoed in places out of state. She's canoed places here, but she's canoed many, many times. She's trying to tell me all the tips and tell me what to do. I'm like, yeah, it's not going to be that hard. You got to paddle and you row. She's nice enough to let me sit in the back. I go, well, thank you. That's very, very nice of you. As we're starting to go down the river, I realized the person in back does all of the paddling, all of the work, all the steering, all the everything, and the person in front works on their tan. They drink a beer. Eventually, she's trying to correct me and say, you're doing it wrong. You got to paddle this way. So I'm egging her on. I'm purposely doing it wrong. Now she's like, I can do it better. I'm like, well, come back here and show me. She's like, all right, I'm going to come back there. She comes in back, and she lets me sit in front. Now, this is a 10-mile float we went on, 10 miles. She gets in back, and she paddled for 10 straight minutes, and then said, switch! And we switched back. And I got to paddle the rest of the way. Kind of proud of myself for something. She did twice, and I did 0 times. The expert canoer did it twice. She flipped the canoe twice. And I flipped it 0 times. And when she flipped it, I mean flipped it. Everything got wet. Everything was underwater. We had to have our friends help us get the water out of the canoe to continue. We went down the 10-mile float with me doing all of the paddling, but 10 minutes. And we got to a certain point at the end, and my friend didn't have a watch. He thought we were going to be late. So he says, we need to hurry, and we need to get back, or we're going to miss the bus. So for the last 30 minutes, I'm paddling as hard as I can. My back's sore, my arms are sore. And we get to where we need to be picked up, and all of a sudden I realize we're an hour early, and we have no money to buy what we're out of, which is beer. An hour earlier, no beer. Eventually we get picked up, we go back to our cabin. And I realized that if you ever have the chance to go floating, don't do it in a canoe. Do it in a raft. It's more fun. It's like when you go down a bowling ball, when it goes down the lane, it just, with bumpers, it would just bounce off the bumpers and go down. No paddling necessary. That's a raft. A canoe, you have to paddle the whole time. It's a little bit harder. But I realized I had fun the whole time. I was there with my friends. We laughed. We had fun. We drank a lot. And I'm going to go back. I'm just going to go back and do it in a raft. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Chris. I will be floating down the Merrimack River on Saturday.
How long was it?